Hello and welcome to Harry Cole Saves the West, the show where American grit meets British backbone. Tonight, what the hell is going on in Britain? Has my old country lost its marbles? From councils banning Israeli fans from football matches over safety fears, to police too scared to arrest protesters as they chant globalise the intifada. Migrants are kicked out, only to get straight back on a small boat to Britain in time for breakfast. Meanwhile, an inquiry into perhaps the darkest scandal in British history, the grooming gangs and the subsequent cover-up, is on the brink of collapse. All of this points to one thing: fear. As the Spectator magazine puts it in London tonight, the elephant in the room is Britain in fear of violence. Politicians terrified of mobs, police terrified of headlines, and a government terrified to act. So who's going to have the guts, the balls, to actually try and run that great country again? And breaking tonight, major movement in the war in Ukraine as America finally publishes a new sanctions package on the Kremlin. Oil firms are firmly in the US Treasury's sights tonight. And President Trump has authorized the use of long-range missiles to strike once again deep inside Russia. Joining me to discuss all that tonight, throughout this evening, live here in DC, is Raheem Kassam, editor of the National Pulse. Raheem, let's start with the old country. Let's start with Britain. The grooming gang scandal. Can't find anyone to even run it. Victims are saying they have no confidence in the process. They're quitting it en masse. Meanwhile, in the most ridiculous, I think, summary of exactly what's wrong with Britain's borders is there was a big fanfare as a one-in, one-out deal was announced with France, where migrants who arrived on small boats were sent back to France. Now, guess what happened? The guy was sent back to France, and lo and behold, within days, he's back on the beaches, back in a boat, and back in Britain. Does anything sum up more quite how broken the country is?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Harry.
Welcome back.
As somebody who worked on the grooming gang stories back in 2014, when very few people were willing to touch the subject, to interview the people, the victims, to go to these communities to see what was going on, it doesn't surprise me one bit that this government, this Labour government in the United Kingdom, which ran away from this issue over the last 15, 20 years anyway, that was all going on under a previous Labour government anyhow.
And local councils and local authorities
all
across Northern Britain.
the country, isn't willing to do anything about this, isn't willing to step up about it. But you see, a lot of these stories are old now. A lot of these stories are a couple of decades old now. And so these politicians will get the feeling that they can just try and ride this out, try and bury it under the rug. We've talked about it enough. We don't want to deal with it. You know, we're going to pay lip service to it with a, quote unquote investigation or inquiry, whatever it is. In reality, the reason they don't want to get to the bottom of it was because in a lot of cases, Labour politicians were complicit in it.
I mean, it took Elon Musk, for all his faults and for all his successes, it did take an outsider, an American, to go, hang on, what the hell is this all about? It feels like there's been no moment of national reckoning for Britain on what is, or should be, one of the greatest scandals in British history, if not the greatest. As you say, these stories are old. They were sort of sprinkled along. You know, you had to sort of join the dots. Andrew Norfolk, the great investigative journalist at the Times, was one of the first people to really sew it all together and say, what the hell? It feels like we're still a long way off from that moment of national reckoning. And talk to me how it looks from America, because people I meet here are totally baffled that people aren't, well, frankly, hanging from ropes rather than being locked up because of this story.
Yeah. The difficulty with this is, because so many of these stories have been out there and been told, a lot of the establishment want to wash their hands of it now. You know, oh, we wrote about it, we paid it lip service a decade ago, whatever. I actually, if you look at the history of government inquiries into things, I'm not even really sure why we trust a government inquiry to do anything. You know, government inquiries into 9/11, government inquiries into JFK assassination, government inquiries
still going
into
on.
COVID.
I mean, the inquiry into COVID has lasted longer than COVID.
They all lead nowhere, which is why I think the idea of actually an independent inquiry, independent of government, with real people at its helm, will probably turn up more.
Raheem Kassam, stay there. We're going to talk to someone in London. Joining us tonight from London is Sir Jake Berry, former Tory cabinet minister who has recently defected to Reform. Good evening, Sir Jake. From where we're sitting, it looks like a government that surely cannot carry on like this. Complete loss of control of the borders and complete loss of control over this grooming gangs inquiry. What's going on?
No, it's a complete mess, Harry. In my entire time in politics, I cannot think of a government that's been worse than this. Let's put some of this into context. I mean, they've only been in power 16 months. They have a corruption minister that has had to resign because of a corruption scandal, a homelessness minister that's had to resign because they were making people homeless, a housing minister who had to resign because she couldn't work out how much stamp duties to pay. Today, we found out the victims minister has victims from the worst rape scandal in the UK calling for her to resign, a national security advisor who has questions to ask about the collapse of a Chinese spying trial, an attorney general who's given away British sovereign territory and, by the way, has asked us to pay for the pleasure of doing it, Lord Mandelson, the ambassador to the United States, who had to resign because of his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, a chancellor who lied on her CV and has managed to crash the economy, and a prime minister who is literally the most unpopular leader in the history of our country. I mean, if they are the first 16 months, I cannot imagine to think what they are going to do next to damage this country. It is absolutely terrible over here. We want this rotten Labour government gone, but unfortunately, we're all going to have to wait till the next election to do it.
And apart from that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Wow. Quite the summary there from Sir Jake Berry. Look, Labour have a stonking great majority in Parliament. The Prime Minister serves at his own discretion. He doesn't have to call an election perhaps until 2029 at the latest. However, it strikes me that he doesn't seem to have a grip, as you so eloquently described there, on power. Is there a way you can force him out? Is there a way you can ease him into the country? Or is the country just going to limp on in this doldrums for years more?
Well, I'm sorry to say, you get the constitutional position absolutely right. I can't think of any way of getting rid of him. Maybe his own MPs will persuade him to fall on his sword. Britain needs reform. Britain needs real change. We've got to get rid of this terrible government. And a great example of just how they don't listen to the British people. And this is really serious because we're talking about the victims of probably the worst scandal that this country will ever know, has been today the fact that they are ignoring the victims of the Pakistani rape gangs here in the United Kingdom and ploughing on with this inquiry, which is also in chaos. I mean, this Prime Minister just cannot get anything right, but the people who are paying the price are victims of crime, ordinary men and women here in the UK. We are in a terrible state.
So Jake Berry, Reformer riding high in the polls, 32%, would be enough if an election was held tomorrow. Your old party, the Conservatives, are languishing in the mid-teens. They're within the sort of margin of error for a sort of four-way split with the Liberals and the Greens. The Labour, it looks like they're only going in one direction with the budget. Do you really think Reform are ready to pick up the mantle to run the country? Should as someone once said, the ball come loose at the back of the pack?
Mm-hmm. I remember that person well. Look, I think the really interesting thing, Harry, and I was reflecting on this today when I was up in Lincolnshire with the Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, Dame Andrea Jenkins, is that the problem we have in British politics is we now effectively only have two political parties. There is the established political parties who have a history of failing our country, have presided over decades of decline here in the United Kingdom, and we have Reform. They are the only alternative. It is Britain's last chance to get our mojo back. And if we don't grasp this in the next election, then I'm sorry, decline will simply become our destiny. So I think they will be ready. Britain needs them to be ready. Britain needs Nigel Farage to walk through the front door of Downing Street and try and turn our country around in a way that President Trump managed to do in an extraordinary way as he entered the White House for his second term. He has brought hope, optimism. He's grabbed back control of the southern border in the United States. We want that sort of vision and leadership here for the UK, and it's only with Nigel Farage that we're going to get it.
Across the United Kingdom, though, Reform did make some breakthroughs in the local councils. Kent was their big flagship council. They said that's what a future Reform government would look like. They've just had to suspend 4 councillors for bringing the party into disrepute. They're arguing like rats in a sack. You've got to find 450 at least credible MPs, if the polls are correct, that you are going to form the next government. That is a mammoth task. Is the money in place? Are the donors coming? Tell us what it's like behind the scenes. I know you're helping out Nigel Farage get ready for government, but it feels like they're still a very long way off.
Well, as you started off by saying, there's quite a long way to the next general election, but I can tell you that The groundwork is being laid. The money is coming in. We are getting brilliant people coming forward, offering themselves up as reform candidates at local elections, general elections. We've got the big set of elections in Wales and Scotland and London next year. Whenever it happens, reform will be ready. Not because reform, is desperate for power. It's because Britain needs us to be ready. It is our last chance. I'm really sorry. I know you've left the country. I was sorry to see you go. But I think, the only good thing about Rachel Reeves as Britain is you get to go to a leaving party every single weekend because so many people are heading for the exit because Britain is in such a mess.
So Jake Berry, thank you for joining us. Maybe jump on the lifeboat sooner rather than later in that case. Thank you for joining us tonight. Raheem Kassam, Jake Berry makes a very good point there. That Britain's reputation, and you hear it over here, I hear it over here, is broadly pretty bad. Donald Trump's got a kind of strange relationship with Keir Starmer where they get on publicly. The special relationship has a strong sort of underpinning. But, our reputation is taking a hammering. Are we going to start seeing the Americans and the wider West start to ask the same questions we're asking tonight of what the hell is going on?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I don't think that we really should and can rely on President Trump to help correct course here because, as you say, he's got this strange diplomatic relationship with Sir Keir Starmer. He had one for a minute with Peter Mandelson, and then he didn't know him very suddenly. But he also has a long-term relationship with the country. He has a familial relationship with the country. If Brits are looking for who in this country is looking over to the United Kingdom and thinking, what the heck, we must fix this, then it's none other than the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who actually doesn't have those emotional ties and can look at this very down the line. I mean, I speak to him all of the time. I speak to his team all of the time. And Britain and its bonkersness comes up constantly. I've heard it now, and it's getting worse for nearly the last 10 years that I've been in this city in Washington, D.C. And you joined us recently. You're hearing it all around too, I guess.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Talk about that. Talk about J.D. Vance, because obviously he gave that great Munich speech, which I think
I was there.
He gave a lot of cover to people like Nigel Farage in the United Kingdom, people on the right, to say, a lot of the, there was a big howls of outrage when it first started. But since then, on the free speech issue, for example, it really has become a talking point and an acceptable conversation in the United Kingdom because J.D. Vance did that. Obviously, you're looking forward to the next election cycle. He's out ahead, right? We could end up having one of the most pro-Britain presidents in 3 years' time.
I think you could end up having one of the most pro-freeborn rights of Englishmen presidents of all time. But I'm not sure that he will actually treat modern Britain with much sympathy unless it drastically changes course. Now, of course, Britain has the opportunity to change course. Britons have the opportunity to help change the course of the country by forcing this government into an election, by taking to the streets, by demonstrating peacefully that they don't want this government in power. It doesn't have legitimacy anymore. I don't think the country can really survive until 2029 under a Keir Starmer and a Labour government. So, it's incumbent on both sides of the Atlantic to do this. Whether my American friends like it or not, Britain did help seed the foundations of American liberty. The idea that the things that the founding fathers fought for on this soil were the freeborn rights of Englishmen that they felt they were being denied as colonialists. The favour now has to return the other way.
Yeah, well, we saw Charlie Kirk's incredible speech at the Oxford Union, where he said exactly that. You gave us the seed that we grew into this great tree of a nation. It does strike me, though, that it's beginning to creak. I mean, President Trump slightly snubbed Keir Starmer in Egypt last week after the UK government made some pretty outlandish claims that they were intimately involved in the success of that Hamas peace conference, and then Donald Trump brought up Keir Starmer to the stage, and he was always ready to speak, and then sort of put him in his box. There's been really interesting noises out of the Trade Department, Lutnick's department, Lutnick, the Trade Secretary there, and the Treasury Secretary have all said, look, yeah, we've invested this £4 billion, £5 billion in Britain, but you could have £40 billion if you got your sort of house in order, if you were willing to move more. It does seem to me, post-state visit, where President Trump got his grip and grin with the king, he got his big banquet, post that, it does feel to me like the screws are coming on. The screws are being tightened a little bit more publicly now. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I think what the president does is try to figure out who's a winner and who's a loser. And I think Sir Keir Starmer just gives that whiff of loserdom.
Well, the most unpopular prime minister since polling was invented. I mean, that's not exactly a great. I mean, if you're a prime minister going to see a guy who literally looks through the lens, the TV camera lens of ratings, and your ratings are the worst they've ever been since ratings were invented, it's going to be a tough sell.
And you also have to contextualize it. You know, it's not just since history began, right? It's think about how bad some of these prime ministers have been. Think about Gordon Brown selling out, the country's gold at record low prices. Think about where the gold price is today.
Can you imagine? There would be no black hole. I can't believe we're still talking about Gordon Brown selling the gold. But you make a very valid point. I mean, this is a historically unpopular prime minister compared to some pretty historically unpopular prime ministers. Liz Truss only lasted 44 days.
The country had a 3-day working week in the 70s, and Keir Starmer is less popular.
It is astonishing. So, that's what I'm really interested in is, Trump has started to realise that actually when they came in, they were both elected on a similar mandate of change, both came in on the back of an unpopular government, both had a mandate, both won big, and only one of them is actually seeing, notable successes, not least on the southern border. Tariffs, we can argue about that another day, but whether you agree with them or not, they are bringing in money, they're bringing in revenue for the US Treasury, whereas in the UK, today, 53,000 people now have crossed the channel in this year, which is more than last year. And that's a record year, but we've still got 2 months left of the year.
We're not even talking about legal migration anymore, which is also at record level.
Well, I mean, legal migration is almost is beyond the charts. We've let 20 million people in over the last 15 years. It is fundamentally altered to the demographics of the United Kingdom. But even on these smaller numbers of illegal ones, which you think we are an island. Britain is an island. We're not there now, but Britain is an island. You think it'd be easier to police than a land border, yet they seem incapable of doing it. Nigel Farage, made a big. He was out there early doors, 3, 4, 5 years ago on his fishing boat, pointing to these dinghies, raising. He's just going to be as constricted on all of this, though, isn't he? Keir Starmer, for all his faults, he's boring, he's technocratic, he doesn't have a political bone in his body. We can rehearse all of those arguments again. But at the end of the day, he is fundamentally locked in by various conventions, legal conventions, the Human Rights Act in the UK, and the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Nigel Farage is going to hit exactly those same walls, isn't he?
He is, but he's going to break through them. And the way you do that is say, well, we're doing this anyway. We're the elected government of the day. You can take this to the Supreme Court. You can take this to the ECHR. It's like what President Trump has done. We're going to keep going anyway, despite it. You can fill in your forms and appeal to your bureaucrats and appeal to your activist judges all you like. But the ultimate arbiter of democracy is the people. And if the people have elected us to do this job, it doesn't matter what you say in a stuffy courtroom with a silly wig on.
And you only need 51% in this country, and you only really need 35% of the country to back you in the UK. The Spectator, is almost a sort of weather vane of the British right in the United Kingdom. There's a fascinating cover piece in this week's magazine that says that ministers actually live in physical fear of the voters. Do you think that's overblown, or do you think this is a particularly poor crop of ministers, or they are genuinely scared of the mob?
Look, I think there is this thing going on right now, and it's happening in America too, by the way, where the legitimacy of these governments are being called into question. The very foundation of how these people find themselves in these positions is being called into question. You had this big No Kings protest in Washington, D.C. and across the country, right? You had all these people taking out to the streets. But what was the upshot of all of it? What came off the back of all of it? Well, actually, there were all these videos going around social media and going, well, Nancy Pelosi's been in the Congress for 47 years.
And made $200 million on the side while she did it.
Chuck Schumer, 52 years. Bernie Sanders, 300 years. These people have been here forever. If anyone is behaving like a king, it's these people who are behaving like a king. And so, yes, the mob, on both sides, are starting to question, what are we doing here with this like barely functioning democratic system?
Well, what is it, day 22, 23 of the government shutdown? Doesn't appear to be.
Yeah, but very little is shut down.
Well, exactly.
You know, day
Apart from-
22 of the government shutdown, and everything's normal.
Apart from the museums, and there'll be a very sad nephew.
break in.
Very sad
They've got
nephew
no
who's
security.
very sad nephew who will be arriving and will not be going to the Aerospace Museum and having an early lesson in life about why the Dems have screwed all this
Well,
up.
I'll get on the phone with Chuck Schumer.
If you could.
Yeah.
If you could. I mean, it's that, it does strike me on that fear point, though, pinning back to the UK, is actually, as you said, it only takes 35% of the nation to actually, with our system. It might be even less if the left fractures. You've seen these rise of this Islamic green alliance that's sort of emerging on the hard left. The Liberals, are taking away some of the more wet Tory voters, and reform is is surging. As Jake Berry said, you are there into a almost new two-party system with reform versus the left. Do you think Nigel Farage will have the nerve to deal with what's coming? The entire media establishment, the entire quote-unquote deep state, or the blob, as it's affectionately known in the UK, the BBC, the Guardian, the legal infrastructures, the charity sector, that wall is going to be fairly deafening. Do you think he's got the cajones to do it?
Yeah, I think he has proved himself time and time again. Remember, there are plenty of people who said that he couldn't lead the party back in the day, UKIP. There are plenty of people who said he'd never get a referendum out of David Cameron. There are plenty of people who said that he couldn't go on BBC Question Time and hold his own. There's plenty of people who said he couldn't be an MEP in the European Parliament and be taken seriously. Plenty of people who said he couldn't lead the country out of the European Union. There are plenty of people who said he couldn't go in the jungle and be on I'm a Celebrity and be one of the most popular figures. And he's always beaten expectations. Whether it's from a left-wing perspective or a right-wing perspective, quite frankly, he's always managed to get people to take him more seriously than they wanted to take him originally. The famous phrase post-Brexit now, when he stood in the European Parliamentary Chamber and he said, "You're not laughing now, are you?" And I think most people, whether it's the BBC, whether it's the European Court of Human Rights, whether any of these groups, if they want to underestimate Nigel Farage, they have got another thing coming.
Do you think they've woken up? Yeah, the Spectator argues that Britain's elites, much like the sort of swamp and the sort of Democrat establishment and the legal and law enforcement establishment of the United States, when they suddenly underestimated Trump and then he arrived and here he is. But Britain's elites are scared of losing their jobs, their friends, their status, their cushy jobs on various quangos and boards across the land. Do you think they've woken up yet to how bad it is? And do you think they're waking up too late and actually the British public have snapped?
I don't think they don't know how bad it is. I think they don't mind how bad it is because they're the beneficiaries of how bad it is in a lot of these cases. They're the ones who have watched the rot happen, been part of it all along. I think if you're asking, have they woken up to the fact that they struggle in legitimacy with the general public?
Yeah.
And no, I don't think they've woken up to that so far. But I will add this as a corollary to all of that. I actually think we need to rejig the way our minds work a little bit here. I don't want to ever be governed by a group, a party, a politician, a parliament that doesn't fear blowback from the people.
Yeah, and accountability. You used to advise Nigel Farage. You used to be his chief of staff. You know him very well. Still do. But,
mostly at the bar.
Mostly at the bar. A stiff gin and tonic. What are you saying to him right now? What are you saying? Jake Berry there was talking about the fact they need to find 400 MPs. They've got this slightly rabulous bunch of councillors that are going to be the sort of petri dish of what a reform administration would look like. And so far, it looks a bit. It looks a little bit amateur, frankly.
Good.
Yeah?
No, we don't want the professional political class.
Yeah, but
back
people
in
want their
these
bins collected and they
but
want their elderly care looked after.
And they want the potholes filled, and they want the taxes lowered, and I share all of the same concerns. But it takes time from people who have never served in any government role before to learn the ropes. And yes, there will be infighting along the way. We this should be a whole show about talking about infighting because infighting all across the globe at the moment, on the left and on the right.
We're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about that later. But
And by the way, the infighting is how you get the cream to rise to the top. we shouldn't be afraid of that. Yes, you have to clash with your contemporaries from time to time. God knows, I would not be in the position you would not be in the position you're in if you weren't up for a fight sometimes.
I don't like conflict. I
I know,
I
that's
like
why I
everything.
bully you.
I like everyone to get on, everyone to be harmonious. Raheem, stay there. You're with us throughout the evening for some more conflict, not least for that scandal we're going to talk about that's rocking the young Republican movements. But still ahead, after the break, Donald Trump's hints he's had enough of Europe's wars once again. So could America's first really mean Europe alone? We thought it might. But tonight, breaking news that the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has announced a sanctions package on Russia, on Russian oil firms especially, and British-made Storm Shadows are hitting targets deep inside Russia. So we're going to discuss all of that after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Harry Cole Saves the West. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Lots of content on there you won't want to miss. Just search Harry Cole Saves the West. Well, back to Ukraine. It sounded almost casual, but the signal was clear. President Trump appeared last night to suggest America might once again leave Europe to the Europeans. Didn't sound so good. But breaking news tonight, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has announced a fresh sanctions package on Russia. And the White House and the Pentagon have authorized the use of long-range missiles to strike deep into the heart of Russia once again. So maybe President Trump isn't done with this war just yet. Joining me to discuss all of that is Dan Rice, a former special advisor to Ukraine's armed forces. And Raheem Kassam is still in the studio. But Mr. Rice, good evening. It struck me that things were looking a little bleak earlier in the week with President Trump dangling that promise of Tomahawk missiles, the threat of Tomahawk missiles in the eyes of Putin. That went away. And then the Budapest summit was cancelled, as it appeared there'd be no breakthrough from Russia's maximalist position that not just they don't just want the Donbass and vast swathes of eastern territory for Ukraine, but they want all of those. All of those demands that they won't join NATO, they won't join the EU. We're well versed in what the Russians want. But tonight, Scott Bessent announcing a fresh sanctions package, and we're seeing storm shadows rattling Russian oil refineries deep into Russia once again. Something's changed, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, everybody realizes that Putin does not want peace. And I think President Trump has given every effort to secure peace without increasing and escalating the war. The reality is providing Ukraine with the same weapons that Russia is firing and has been firing into Ukraine for 3.5 years, almost 4 years, is not escalation. And that's where everybody has to stop swallowing the Russian disinformation. They put a lot of effort into this. Giving somebody a gun to go to a gunfight is parody. You don't give them a knife. And we've been giving Ukraine a knife. Under Biden, we gave Ukraine a knife every time. And it cost tens of thousands of Ukrainian lives because we weren't giving an equal weapon. Ukraine is getting hit by cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. You give Ukraine ballistic missiles and cruise missiles back. That's what the Tomahawk is. That's what we need to give them. Right now, Storm Shadows are great. And HIMARS are great, ATACMs, but we need Tomahawks, and that's the next one up, and I think it's going to happen because Putin does not want peace, and he's proven it.
Yeah, we were discussing at length last night the fact with Bill Browder. So Bill Browder, for Putin, peace is almost a sort of existential crisis. He needs this war to continue because if this war ends, so does he. In light of that, it does seem impossible to bring him to the table. Will Ukraine, you've seen the Ukraine armed forces up close, you've advised them, you've helped them over the years. Is it possible for Ukraine to still win this war? Can they drive Russia back to those February 2022 lines? Or are we at stalemate at best?
Ukraine can absolutely win this war if we give Ukraine the appropriate weapons. Now, let me clarify. That does not mean they're going to take the occupied territories by force. The number of landmines in this area is just enormous, and breaching these landmines has proven in 2023 and 2024 impossible. So it's not breaching the landmines; it's winning it politically and militarily together. And so Russia will withdraw when Russia is bleeding, when the gas I mean, basically, it's a gas station masquerading as a country. When the gas station is on fire, they will withdraw. And that's the goal, is to fire enough long-range weapons into Russia, destroy their economy, destroy their GDP, their long-term GDP. And that will hurt Putin. He will be forced between a poor and a difficult decision. But that's what we have to do to him.
Do you welcome then tonight the sanctions package from Scott Bessent? The details are shaky. They are literally breaking as we speak. But as you said, that gas station economy is hitting the Russian oil firms. This has been in the cooking for a long time. You know, ahead of Alaska and the Anchorage summit in August, these sanctions were dangled by the United States, only for Putin to get on a plane and sort of see them off. They had that phone call last week, 2-hour phone call that seems to have delayed at least the Tomahawks. But it seems that President Trump might have lost a little patience here. What are these sanctions, do you think, going to do to the Russian economy? Will it be enough?
Well, you know, Harry, I mean, I don't think we've had a president in our history who has known the political power of the U.S. economy. And President Trump knows that better than anyone. And now it's all coming to bear, and he's got Secretary Bessent implementing sanctions. But more importantly, Ukraine has implemented sanctions. When I say sanctions, that means long-range fires to destroy the Russian GDP. If you hit them on both sides, supply and demand, you're hitting the supply side by long-range fires, destroying refineries. You're hitting them on the demand side by putting sanctions against anybody buying Russian oil. You're getting them on both places. This is where I think it's going to go, Harry. I think President Trump has the ability right now, and he has the political capital within the Gulf states. He destroyed their biggest enemy in the Sunni Shia rift. Iran was the enemy to Qatar and UAE and Saudi. I think he's going to go and do a victory lap, and he's going to say, I want $10 billion from each of you to go into the Ukraine Victory Fund to buy long-range fires. He told taxpayers he is not going to have taxpayers pay for the Ukraine war. He's going to get somebody else to pay it. He's got the Europeans right now paying for it. $28 billion. Now he's going to get the Gulf states to pay for it. He's going to do a victory lap, and he's going to end the war because he's going to give long-range fires to Ukraine and make sure that's the real security guarantee that should have been given in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. That's what he's going to do. I believe that's going to happen.
That is fascinating. Do you think, I mean, it felt to me like on the sort of high on the success of the Hamas deal last week, he sort of almost rushed into trying to bounce Putin into a fresh meeting, a fresh summit, and actually, you know, sort of bit off slightly more than he can chew. And the feedback, any feedback suggesting that Russians were ready to move was clearly wide of the mark. But do you think that, that Witkoff, Jared Kushner Gulf relationship, tell us a little bit more about that. I'm really interested about how you think that's going to work.
I know it's being discussed at the highest levels, and it's a twofold approach. So it's get the Gulf states to fund the Victory Fund, and two, to produce more oil. And if the Gulf states produce more oil, it'll keep oil low. Putin knows he can't survive 3 years of low oil. And President Trump has 3 years left, over 3 years. So get the Gulf states to do two things. One, give money for the Ukraine Victory Fund, long-range fires to destroy Russia, make sure that even after we have a ceasefire, that Russia never has another incursion. Two, keep oil low, increase their production until Russia ends up withdrawing to the 91 borders. Back to your original question. We don't need to militarily win the war. Ukraine does not militarily win the occupied territories. We need Russia to withdraw to 91 borders, or we keep oil low and destroy the Russian economy until there is no Putin.
Dan Rice, fascinating stuff. I hope you're right. Come back and see us soon as that plays out. Please, thank you for joining us tonight. Raheem Kassam, fascinating from Dan Rice there. That, the Witkoff, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner Gulf model could be Peace 2.0 in Ukraine, bringing the Gulf in to not just rebuild Gaza, rebuild war-torn Ukraine as well, put the squeeze there on the Russian economy, that oil economy, and bring Putin to the table the hard way. I mean, that's kind of 4D chess, but do you think that's going to work?
I don't want to make a prediction of whether or not I think that, like you say, 4D peace plan could work, but these are people with a pretty decent track record now. Mm-hmm. They are people who are taken very seriously around the world. They are people who have forced others to the table who people never thought would come to the table. I mean, you can go back to the Abraham Accords, right? Yep. It's not just the most recent stuff that we're talking about. And look, President Trump went into this negotiation or attempted negotiation with both sides of the Ukraine-Russia war with a very, very open mind. On both sides of it, remember how he treated Zelensky at the very beginning?
Yeah.
They kind of bullied him in the Oval Office and said, listen, you need to accept
You don't hold no cards, yeah.
You don't hold no cards. And this is now they're telling Putin the same thing. It's like, hey, listen, this guy is now ready to make peace. You have to get on the same agenda. Or what happened today with the sanctions, Rosneft and Lukoil, is going to be paltry in comparison to what comes next.
Do you think Donald Trump will do that? Because every time it almost seems like he's getting there, he pulls back. Putin phones him up and praises him and lavishes praise on him for his peace deal in the Middle East, or he jumps on a plane and God knows what he told him behind the scenes. But Trump went into that Anchorage meeting saying, ceasefire now, then talks. Then he said no ceasefire, then talks, and and it all just goes back. And every time he's almost ready to, put the throttle on, put the boot on the neck, he seems to step back.
Yeah, well, Putin is a master of buying time. But unfortunately, time might be one of the things that Putin does not have anymore.
Yeah.
Increasing frustration amongst his own base in Russia. I mean, I'm talking about the people directly around him. I'm talking about the oligarchs. I'm talking about the generals. There is increasing frustration, by the way, in the international community. That's why the Gulf states are looking at this and going, yeah, this guy, if he's going to be intransigent about it, then it's up to the world to come in here and start doing something.
It really is the word, isn't it? It is intransigent.
And then
he's thumbing his nose.
But the last thing about it is that he's an old man. And he's not a very well old man.
Yeah, he didn't look great in Alaska, did he?
And so he's trying to run down the clock, but the clock may well run down him.
I mean, but also it's a kind of better the devil you know, who steps into a chaotic, collapsing Russian mafia state. The people that could be someone even worse than Putin waiting in the wings.
Why are you looking at me when you said that?
You're a betting man. What are the odds, do you think, of the winter is coming, to coin a phrase. The lines will freeze until the fresh spring offensives, when both sides will have time to reman, to rearm. What do you say the odds are of, by say, I don't know, time for the next year's Nobel Peace Prize, Donald Trump having brought peace, a lasting peace, or a lasting ceasefire at least, to Ukraine?
I am a betting man. I would not make that bet.
Really? You think this is going to grind on for a fourth year?
And by the way, it's not an insult to President Trump or his team. I'm not trying to call them incapable of doing this. I just think that, as I say, Putin is determined to try and run the clock out. What he's trying to run the clock out on mostly is the Trump presidency.
Yeah.
He thinks that he can deal with others easier or manipulate others easier. And
J.D. Vance has made clear that he is not as an interventionist as Donald Trump has been known to be. And he was well reported that he was uncomfortable with that strike on Iran, which was ultimately successful. The Republican base ain't up for a long forever war with America entangled in it. So we were pivoting back to top.
Let's say a Democrat wins the next presidential election.
Yeah.
Who's that going to be? Who's going to talk tough to Vladimir Putin? Pete Buttigieg.
All right. On that note, we're going to get into more infighting. The young conservatives on both sides of the pond are at it again. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Harry Cole Saves the West. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. You won't miss a thing. Harry Cole Saves the West. You can't miss it. Now, right-wing politics is supposed to be disciplined, decisive, united. Now, it's a united stance they like to put out. But what we're seeing right now is anything but that. Meanwhile, the left seem to be infighting like rats in a sack as ever, especially when someone's revealed to having a Nazi tattoo, but yet backed by Bernie Sanders. Raheem Kassam is still with me in the studio for the rest of the show. Raheem, the New York Republicans appear to have been disbanded, or certainly imploded, over a massive leak of text messages and WhatsApp messages that had jokes about Hitler and racism and classic old-fashioned Tory boy, scandal stuff, but it's blown up to become a national story as the Dems have sort of grabbed it and used it as a stick to beat the administration, or attempt to. What's going on? You know that world well.
Yeah, and I think for people who are watching this who think, you know, why are we talking about, you know, New York young Republican politics?
Young men saying, putting stupid things on the internet.
The reason is the New York Young Republican Club is one of the, if not the largest club in the country, and many of its members have gone on to be presidents, vice presidents, cabinet members. Some of the current crop are now working in the Trump administration as well. And so it really does matter. These are the kind of groups that bring up the talent and that they get moved into very powerful positions, not just in the country, but of course in the world. And they have profiles and portfolios that people should concern themselves with who these people are and what are their backgrounds. Now, I will make a disclosure. I serve on the advisory board of the New York Young Republican Club.
What are you advising them tonight?
Well, stop fighting amongst each other for a start. The New York State Republican, Young State Republican group has, in fact, been virtually disbanded over this. This was the group of people that had all of these nasty
sort of slate within a slate within a,
in this
yeah.
thing, and they were fighting with the New York Young Republicans. And, you know, all this very, very messy. For the people watching this at home that don't know this, actually, Harry Cole was the man who used to report accurately on young conservative politics in the United Kingdom.
As Gore Vidal said, though, isn't it, that student politics is so vicious because the stakes are so low.
That's right. That was your mantra.
Indeed, but you know, the point you're making, these aren't kids, right? These are young men. These are young men and women.
Yeah.
These are, you know, some of them are well into their 20s. Some of them work in the administration.
Yes.
How bad is this for? What an unforced error is this for the right, for the Republicans, and for the Trump administration?
Listen, here's the other reason it really matters right now, because New Yorkers are making a decision over who is going to be their next mayor.
Yeah.
And they're looking at Zohran Mamdani, the Red-Green Alliance. You know, Hamas won't condemn Hamas terrorist candidate. And then they're looking at, well, who is the Republican and what are the other alternatives? You've got Cuomo, the former governor, still in the race. You've got Curtis Sliwa, this guy who's run this Guardian Angels group in New York for decades, in the race, splitting the vote.
Why is he still in the race? I mean, the guy looks crazy. Well, it turns out wearing a beret.
People have their
He's
theories.
taking 20% of the. Presumably, this is it ego? Is it money?
He walked out on his own radio station
But
today.
why has no one? You know, why hasn't President Trump picked up the phone and said, "Dude, you're a Republican. Get off the stage." Republicans have pulled out of this race before. Mike Bloomberg was given a clear run. Why is this guy still in the race when actually New York, one of the greatest cities on the earth, is about to fall to, you know, as you say, a commie?
I think there's a couple of things going on here. And number one, Curtis Sliwa is you want to talk about intransigence in the last segment? He's a very intransigent man. He believes it is his right to be in that race. He walked out on his own radio station today when the radio station boss told him on air to drop out.
I mean, that's pretty cringe, right?
Yeah, and he said, I'll never come back here. WABC, one of the largest stations in the country, said he'll never come back here despite what happens in the election. He's just being that obstinate right now. The other part of it is, I think a lot of Republicans around the country are accelerationists now.
Yeah.
They actually want to see Mamdani in charge because they want a bogeyman.
Britain has made that mistake.
Yes.
That is a fatal mistake. You never let these guys in. You give an inch, they take a mile. They poison not only the parties, but the institutions, the parliaments, the wider sort of infrastructure of politics gets infiltrated by these people, because it's not just, you know, it's not just the mayor, it's the people he brings in and people he puts into things.
Well,
I hate it. I hate it when people say we need to see these communists and how bad they are.
Listen, worse more than anything, you're handing them tens of billions of dollars in a budget. And they could do whatever they want. Remember what Lutfur Rahman did with that money in Tower Hamlets in London all those years ago? A £2 billion budget that he was in charge of, and he distributed it amongst all his sectarian Islamist mates. And I have no doubt that Mamdani will do similar. This is a critical error. That's why the infighting is especially on the tips of people's tongues right now, because it's another thing that will lead to Mamdani being victorious.
I mean, Cuomo is not a great candidate. Obviously, he was the governor.
Understatement of the year.
He was the governor who had to resign for
killing grandmothers and grandfathers.
Well, the COVID stuff was one side of it. There was also some rather fruity personal allegations.
Sure.
I want to show you a video of one of the most bizarre interventions in American politics I've ever seen. It's Hot Girls for Cuomo.
So today, I'm officially starting Hot Girls for Cuomo. So if you are a hot girl for Andrew Cuomo, I want to hear from you.
Emily Austin there, launching her new show with a interesting proposition there, Raheem Kassam. Are you a hot girl for Cuomo?
No. No, I don't even have a riposte for that. Look, there's a lot of money that gets thrown around influencer circles, and the Cuomo people are throwing a lot of money around at the moment. These things are not organic. I'm happy to say that, and Emily Austin can screech at me if she wants to, but this is a person who has made a career off being an influencer. Like she sells herself as a spokesman for things if the price is right.
Just on
It's supposed to be a Republican.
Just on the hot girls of Cuomo, though. This is a guy that did face allegations.
She's not even that hot.
But, okay, be nice. Come on, we're all friends. We're all friends here. This is infighting. This is the sort of exactly the sort of right-wing infighting.
I'm trying to create viral clips here, Harry.
Exactly the sort of right-wing infighting that is that allows communists like Zoran Mandami to take over.
Well, look,
but on the point, it sort of sums up quite how bad this entire, the Democrats have got this, the Independents have got this, the Republicans have got this. That the only person that could really stop Mandami is an incredibly flawed and frankly disgraced former politician. I mean, it's not a great proposition, is it?
So I think hot girls for Cuomo is how Cuomo got in trouble in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing. When I say hot, I use it in a Trumpian sense. This is not somebody...
We are the hottest country in the world right now.
This is not somebody who people are necessarily going to want to listen to and follow. And I think it doesn't help Cuomo. And I'm not sure that the people of New York, I'm not sure that I particularly would want Cuomo any more than I want Mamdani.
Wow, okay. Well, I mean, we'll see how that goes in 4 years' time when taxes in New York are sky high and Florida's real estate is booming as every businessman and anyone earning money flees Manhattan for the sunnier climes. Now, it's not just the right that are fighting. I keep saying this, again, a remarkable story that is breaking out of Maine and rumbling on out of Maine. Graham Plattner, who is the Senate candidate in the Democratic primary to be the Democrat senator for Maine, has got in front of a story about his Nazi tattoo. He says, as we discussed last night, that he got drunk as a Marine in Croatia and had a SS skull and crossbones tattooed onto his chest. Now, he has revealed tonight, with his shirt off, live on television, you don't get that in Britain, that he's had the tattoo covered up pretty poorly. Now, Plattner is being backed by the hard left. Bernie Sanders likes him. He's been on a political journey, you might think, from barman at the tune-in with a Nazi tattoo to progressive hope for America. Raheem, Kassam, this guy's cooked, right?
I will say something here that you're not expecting.
You have a Nazi tattoo?
No, not quite.
But
you know what's funny is I had a friend in the Italian army at university who, when he was on a lad's night out, they made a decision to get stupid tattoos. They were kids, they were being idiots.
They were drunk.
And they were drunk, and they were on Shorley, exactly, and they did something really fundamentally stupid. Now, the difference here is that he got it corrected pretty sharpish and didn't wait for many years to get it done.
Unlike
this guy. And critically, it's not running, it has never run for office. Whereas this guy is. And this guy is seen to be the next... I mean, talk about people who they are saying is hot. They're saying that he is the next hot thing in the Democrat Party. But this is the type of person he is, and this is the type of things he's done. Now, listen, if he's telling the truth, that he didn't know what he was doing when he got a Totenkopf, then I will have some level of sympathy, right?
Yeah.
But if it is true, and if it comes out as true, that he was going around DC showing this off to people, that's the counter story out there at the moment, then he doesn't need to be just ridiculed and pilloried. He should be banned from the Democratic Party. They should kick him out. He should never be involved in politics ever again for the rest of his life.
Bernie Sanders dancing on the head of a pin today, saying, they just don't like him because he's standing up against the genocide in Gaza, blah, 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 blah. This guy's been sort of latched on by the hard left as a sort of future, as you say, hot thing in the Democrats.
Not even that hot.
If this was yeah, you're on fire tonight. If this was a Republican or even a moderate Democrat, the hard left would be stringing him up.
Well, you saw what they did to my friend Joe Kent a couple of months ago when they were alleging that he had some kind of Waffen SS tattoo or something. Turned out to be completely untrue, but the Atlantic magazine published it anyway. They didn't actually check with him. They didn't get a comment from him. And the whole story they just tried to bury under the rug very quickly. Now, they all came for Joe Kent at the time, national security advisor in the Trump administration, and then they all tried to bury the story. Now they're all making excuses for this guy, right? I opened this segment by saying, look, if he can prove that this was a genuine mistake, then let's see the evidence that you actually tried to get this covered up. But right now, all we're hearing from people who have known him for years is that he used to show this thing off and he knew exactly what it was.
We better get to the tune-in to investigate this.
I'll be there.
This
I'll be there.
once. Anyway, I believe congratulations of sorts are going your way tonight. Raheem Kassam. Now, your outlet, the National Pulse, has, just as every single mainstream outlet, pretty much from Fox News to CNN to the Washington Post to the New York Times to the New York Post, you know, not just left-wing, not just right-wing publications, but across the board have resigned from the Pentagon Press Corps over restrictions put on by the Defence Secretary on soliciting information that's not, basically doing journalism, in my view. You are running towards the party at the Pentagon and become an accredited member of the Pentagon Press Pack, but in doing so had to sign a pretty restrictive form saying you basically will just take only approved stories.
So I, just to conclude on the last point, I saw a little bit of graffiti around Washington, D.C. today that said, fascists eat at Butterworth's. And I thought to myself...
Your esteemed establishment.
My establishment. And I thought to myself, yeah, but fascists work at the tune-in. So, which is just how...
Okay, all right. Let's not get us barred from there tonight.
Listen,
no, on that point...
I'm barred from there every night.
On the Pentagon.
On the Pentagon stuff. Listen, here's my point about it, and here's why I was happy to sign that form that says, you know, you can't openly solicit national security advisors for stories in the halls of the Pentagon, right? You can do it virtually. It doesn't say you can't do it elsewhere. It doesn't say you can't meet up with them and develop source relationships or have phone calls or whatever. It's that you can't chase them down hallways, as some of the mainstream press were doing, especially under Trump, to try and elicit national security secrets. I understand
But
that.
also,
It's
what
the Department
about
of War.
But what about criminalising people who handle information from whistleblowers, from sources? I've done it in the past, and I would fall foul of this. I would go to prison for handling what is legitimate public interest information.
Yeah, I would actually probably do it myself too, and I would allow the Court of Public Opinion to weigh down enough on the Department of War if I felt like the story was worth it enough to challenge the things that they have in the documentation.
So you don't feel like you're being brought in as a patsy?
Here's the thing. I want interviews with high-profile people in that department. I want the Secretary of War on the record. I want their spokespeople on the record. There is one way to do that, and it's to be in the building. If the corporate media wants to eschew that and say, we're not going to be there, we're not going to do it, then that's on them.
All right, Raheem Kassam, passionate defence there for, it's access journalism, isn't it?
Access journalism.
All right, we'll see you when you eventually get a story, get locked up. You can come back and we'll come down the line from prison to that one. Right, that was Harry Cole Saves the West. We're out of time, sadly. See you tomorrow.